The rumble of trucks never stopped under the bridge. Some nights, it sounded like thunder. Other nights, it sounded like the city reminding him he didn't belong anymore. Ethan Parker pulled his thin blanket tighter around his shoulders and watched his breath drift into the cold Chicago air. The concrete beneath him felt harder than usual. His stomach hurt. Not the sharp kind of hurt, the empty kind. The kind that stayed so long it started feeling normal. A train groaned somewhere in the distance. The river below reflected broken strips of yellow light. A few feet away, an old shopping cart rattled when the wind hit it. Ethan looked at his reflection in a dark window across the street. For a second, he didn't recognize the man staring back. The beard, the tired eyes, the coat with duct tape holding one sleeve together. 43 years old, and sleeping beneath a bridge. Nobody looking at him that morning would have guessed what he could do with a pencil. Nobody would have guessed he once designed buildings. Nobody would have guessed he still carried folded sketches in his backpack. Nobody would have guessed he was practicing for a future he couldn't yet see. Not even Ethan. He stood slowly. His knees cracked. The cold had settled deep into them months ago. He grabbed his backpack. Everything he owned fit inside it. A few shirts, a notebook, a charger, a half-empty bottle of water, and a cracked phone hanging on to 7% battery. That phone was his lifeline.
His daughter lived inside it. At least the pictures did. He checked the screen. Still no messages. He slipped it back into his pocket. Then he started walking. The city was waking up. Coffee shops opened. Buses hissed at corners. Workers hurried toward offices. Nobody looked twice at him. Most days that hurt. Some days it didn't. Today he wasn't sure. The church on Wells Street served breakfast every Wednesday. Ethan arrived early. The smell of eggs drifted through the doorway. His stomach woke up immediately. A volunteer smiled. "Morning, Ethan." He smiled back. "Morning." She handed him a tray. Most people forgot homeless faces. She never did. That mattered more than she knew. He sat alone. Across the room, a man named Larry waved. Larry slept in a shelter nearby. He had been homeless almost 8 years. Long enough to stop making plans. Long enough to stop expecting anything. "You hear about the snow coming?" Larry asked. Ethan nodded. "Yeah. 3 days. That's what they said." Larry shook his head. "Hate January." Ethan laughed softly. "Me too." But the truth was he hated much more than January. He hated elevators, because elevators reminded him of office buildings. Office buildings reminded him of who he used to be, and that hurt worse than the cold. 6 years earlier, he worked for an architecture firm downtown. Not a huge company, not famous, but steady. Good pay, good health insurance, a small house in the suburbs, a wife, a daughter.
A future that seemed safe. He used to ride the train every morning, carrying blueprints. He loved drawing, always had. As a kid, he sketched houses in school notebooks. As a grown man, he turned sketches into real buildings. That feeling never got old. Then came a Tuesday he would remember forever. The firm called everyone into a conference room. Nobody smiled, nobody joked. The owner looked exhausted. He stood at the front holding papers. Ethan knew immediately. Bad news has a smell. Not a real smell, something heavier, something that settles into a room before words arrive. The recession had hit harder than expected. Projects vanished, clients disappeared, money dried up. Half the staff got cut that day. Ethan was one of them, just like that. 20 years of work, gone. A cardboard box, a handshake, an apology. The train ride home felt longer than usual. His wife, Melissa, tried to stay positive. "We'll figure it out." That's what she said. And for a while they did. Savings helped, then savings disappeared. Credit cards helped, then credit cards filled up. Interviews came, then stopped. Months turned into a year, then another. The stress changed everything. Arguments got louder, silences got longer. Fear moved into the house. Fear never paid rent, but it lived there anyway. One night, Melissa sat at the kitchen table. She didn't cry, That almost made it worse. I can't do this anymore. Ethan knew what was coming. Still hurt. She left 6 weeks later.
Their daughter stayed mostly with her. The house followed soon after. Then came the foreclosure notice. Then came the storage unit. Then came the car. Then came the bridge. People always imagine homelessness happens all at once. Usually it doesn't. Usually it arrives one piece at a time. One bill, one missed payment, one bad month, then another, until one day there's nowhere left to fall. Ethan finished breakfast. He thanked the volunteers, then headed toward the public library. The library saved him more times than he could count. Heat in winter, air conditioning in summer, bathrooms, computers, internet. Nobody asked questions. Nobody cared where you slept. Inside, he sat at his usual computer. The keyboard had a missing letter. He knew exactly which one. The librarian named Sandra nodded from the front desk. "Morning. Morning." She smiled. "Job hunting?" "Same as always." "Keep at it." Simple words, but they mattered. Ethan opened email. 3 rejections waited. No interviews, no callbacks, nothing. He stared at the screen. The familiar feeling arrived. Not anger, not sadness, something emptier. The feeling of being invisible. He almost closed everything. Almost. Instead, he opened his notebook. The sketchbook looked worn. Corners bent, pages stained. Inside were hundreds of drawings. Buildings, bridges, coffee shops, apartment complexes, ideas, dreams. Things nobody had paid him to draw. Things he couldn't stop drawing anyway.
Even homeless, he kept sketching. Every single day. It was his ritual, his promise to himself. No matter how bad life became, he would draw one thing. Just one. That promise kept something alive inside him. Today he sketched the library entrance, the sunlight hitting the glass, the people moving through the doors, the little details nobody noticed. Hours passed. Outside, snow started falling. Inside, Ethan kept drawing. Around noon, Sandra approached his table. She looked down at the page. Her eyes widened. "You drew that?" Ethan shrugged. "Yeah, that's incredible." He smiled politely. People said that sometimes. Nothing usually came from it. Still felt nice hearing it. Sandra looked again. "You ever show these anywhere?" "No." "You should." He laughed. "Who's buying drawings from a homeless guy?" Sandra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied the page. Then she said something Ethan would remember for years. "Maybe the wrong people are seeing them." Then she walked away. Ethan stared at the sketch. He wasn't sure why those words stayed with him, but they did. The wrong people are seeing them. That night, the temperature dropped hard. Chicago winters didn't play around. The cold crawled through clothes, through blankets, through skin. By midnight, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat beneath the bridge watching headlights pass. The river moved slowly below. His phone buzzed suddenly. His heart jumped. A text. His daughter, 16 years old now. The bright spot in his life. The message was short. "Love you, Dad." That was all. 3 words, but they hit harder than anything. His eyes filled. He typed carefully. "Love you too, kiddo." Then he stared at the screen. A photo of her smiling looked back. He missed birthdays, school events, ordinary Tuesdays. He carried that guilt everywhere. The city kept moving above him. Cars, trucks, sirens, people rushing home. Nobody knew a man beneath their tires was fighting not to disappear. Nobody knew he still dreamed. Nobody knew he still drew buildings in the dark. Nobody knew he wasn't finished. Not yet. The next morning, he woke before sunrise. The snow had covered everything. White streets, white sidewalks, white rooftops. Even the bridge looked softer. For a moment, just a moment, the city looked beautiful. Then reality returned. His hands hurt. His feet hurt. His stomach hurt. He stood and started walking. He didn't know it yet. But before that week ended, someone would see one of his sketches. Someone who would change the direction of his life forever. And that person was already closer than he realized.
The snowstorm hit Chicago harder than expected. By Friday morning, the city looked darried. Cars disappeared beneath white hills. Sidewalks narrowed into icy paths. The wind cut through every layer Ethan owned. His fingers felt numb before sunrise. He spent most of the day inside the library, not because he wanted to, because outside had become dangerous.
Sandra walked past his table twice. Both times she glanced at his sketches. The third time she stopped. "You got a minute?" Ethan looked up. "Sure." She held a flyer, a bright blue flyer. "The community center downtown is hosting a design fair." Ethan frowned. "A design fair?" "Local artists, students, architects, people showing their work." He laughed. "I don't exactly fit in there." "You might." Sandra handed him the flyer. "They're accepting submissions tomorrow." Ethan looked at the paper. The event was only 3 days away. He almost handed it back. Almost. Instead, he folded it carefully. "Thanks." She smiled. "Just think about it." After she walked away, Ethan stared at the flyer for nearly an hour. His mind kept arguing with itself. Nobody wanted his work. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody cared. Then another thought appeared. What if one person did? He hated that thought. Hope was dangerous. Hope could hurt. Still, he couldn't stop thinking about it. That evening he sat under the bridge sketching. The wind howled through the steel beams overhead. A train rattled somewhere nearby. Ethan drew anyway. His notebook rested on his knee. His pencil moved steadily. When life fell apart, drawing was the one thing that stayed, the one thing that still felt like him. A homeless man named Curtis sat beside him. Curtis watched quietly for a minute. Then he nodded toward the notebook. "You ever sell those?" "No." "You should." Ethan laughed. "Everybody says that."
Maybe everybody's right. The two men sat silently afterward. The river moved beneath them, cold and black. Finally, Curtis spoke again. "You know why most people stay stuck?" Ethan shrugged. "No. They start believing where they are as who they are." Ethan looked at him. Curtis wasn't smiling, wasn't joking, just speaking plainly. The words stayed with him. He would think about them for years. The next morning, he walked 3 miles to the community center. The building smelled like coffee and fresh paint. Young designers carried portfolios. Students carried laptops. Everyone looked busy. Everyone looked successful. Ethan suddenly felt foolish. His coat looked worn. His shoes were falling apart. He almost turned around. Almost. Then he remembered his daughter. "Love you, Dad." 3 simple words. He took a breath and walked inside. A volunteer sat behind a folding table. "Here for submissions?" Ethan nodded. The volunteer handed him forms. "Need those filled out." Ethan looked at the paperwork. Name, address, phone. He froze. Address. The question always hit hard. He finally wrote N.A. The volunteer noticed, but didn't say anything. That small kindness meant more than Ethan expected. He submitted 5 sketches. Then he left. No expectations, no dreams, just relief. At least he tried. 3 days later, the design fair opened. Ethan wasn't planning to attend. The event felt like another world, a world that no longer belonged to him. Then Sandra found him at the library.
"You going tonight?" "No." "Why not?" He shrugged. "Don't see the point." Sandra crossed her arms. "Your work's hanging on the wall." Ethan blinked. "What?" "Your work is hanging on the wall." He stared at her. She smiled. "You should probably see it." 2 hours later, Ethan stood inside the community center. His heart pounded. People filled the room. Music played softly overhead. Conversations floated through the air. And there they were, his sketches, framed, mounted, displayed beneath bright lights. For a moment he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. People were stopping to look, actually looking, not walking past, not ignoring, looking. One woman pointed at a drawing. A couple discussed another. Someone took a picture. Ethan stood frozen. The feeling was strange, like finding a piece of himself he thought was gone. A voice interrupted him. "These yours?" Ethan turned. A gray-haired man stood nearby. Nice coat, sharp eyes, maybe 60 years old. Ethan nodded. Yeah. The man looked impressed. You're talented. Thank you. Robert extended his hand. Name's Robert. Ethan. Robert studied him for a second, then looked back at the sketches. Professional training? I used to work in architecture. Used to? Ethan hesitated. Long story. Robert nodded slowly, the kind of nod that said he understood more than he was asking. For the next 20 minutes they talked about design, buildings, city planning, old architecture, modern mistakes.
Things Ethan hadn't discussed with anyone in years. It felt natural, comfortable, like waking up after a long sleep. Eventually, Robert pulled a business card from his pocket. Ever consider freelance work? Ethan almost laughed. Nobody's hiring me. Robert didn't smile. I'm asking if you've considered it. Ethan looked at the card, the company name printed across the top. A real architectural consulting firm, downtown Chicago. His stomach tightened. Robert pointed at the sketches. There's skill here. Ethan didn't know what to say. Robert handed him the card. Call me Monday. Then he walked away. Just like that. Ethan stared at the card, certain it couldn't be real, certain he'd misunderstood, certain something would ruin it, because that's what happened lately. Good things appeared, then disappeared. Still, for the first time in years, a door had opened. A tiny one, but a real one. That night he couldn't sleep. The card stayed in his pocket. He checked it every hour, afraid it might vanish. Monday arrived, then fear arrived with it. He walked circles around the library. What if Robert changed his mind? What if he called and got rejected? What if the opportunity wasn't real? Fear always had questions, thousands of them. Finally, Sandra noticed. You okay? Ethan showed her the card. She read it, then looked at him. Did you call? No. Why? He didn't answer, because the truth sounded ridiculous. He was scared, not of failure. Failure felt familiar.
He was scared of hope. Sandra handed the card back. Then she said something simple. You've already survived the worst. Ethan stared at her. She continued. Make the call. So he did. His hands shook. The phone battery sat at 12%. The call connected. A receptionist answered, then transferred him. Then Robert's voice came through. Glad you called. 3 words. Nothing special. Yet Ethan felt something shift inside. Robert invited him to the office Wednesday. Not an interview, just a meeting, a conversation. But Ethan knew it mattered. The next 2 days felt endless. He needed clean clothes. He needed a haircut. He needed to look employable. The problem was money. Money barely existed. Curtis helped first. He handed Ethan $20. No. Ethan tried giving it back. Curtis shook his head. Pay me later. Then Sandra surprised him. She brought a Goodwill voucher. Someone donated these. Ethan knew she was lying, knew she paid for it herself. He accepted anyway. Sometimes pride had to make room for gratitude. Wednesday morning arrived. The city was gray. The wind carried the smell of snow. Ethan stood outside the office building downtown. Glass walls stretched toward the clouds. People hurried through revolving doors. He remembered this world. The coffee cups, the business shoes, the security desks, the elevators. For a second, he felt like he belonged again. Then he remembered where he slept last night. The feeling vanished. He entered anyway.
Robert greeted him personally. That surprised him. Most executives wouldn't. Most executives wouldn't even remember his name. They sat in a conference room overlooking the city. For nearly an hour they talked, not just about design, about life, about work, about setbacks, about rebuilding. Robert listened carefully, never interrupted, never judged. Finally, he leaned back. We have a problem. Ethan's heart dropped. Here it comes. The rejection, the disappointment, the familiar ending. But Robert wasn't finished. We need help on a project. Ethan blinked. Robert continued. Temporary contract work. Silence filled the room. Ethan wasn't sure he heard correctly. Robert slid a folder across the table. Inside were project drawings, real project drawings, real work, the kind of work Ethan dreamed about every night. His hands trembled. Robert smiled slightly. You interested? Ethan looked down at the folder.
then out at the skyline, then back at Robert. Years of failure, years of shame, years beneath bridges, years of people saying no. And now this, a chance, just a chance. Nothing guaranteed, nothing secure, but real. Ethan swallowed hard and said yes. What he didn't know was that the hardest part still lay ahead, because getting an opportunity and keeping it were two very different things. Ethan left the office, carrying the folder like it was made of glass. The city looked different that afternoon. Not changed, just different. The same buses rolled past.
The same people hurried along sidewalks. The same wind pushed between buildings. But for the first time in years, he wasn't carrying only survival. He was carrying possibility. That scared him. Possibility meant something could be lost. That night, under the bridge, he opened the folder again. Then one more time. The project involved redesigning several abandoned commercial spaces on the south side. Nothing glamorous, nothing that would make headlines. But it was real work, professional work, the kind he thought was gone forever. Curtis watched him flipping through pages. "You smiling?" Ethan looked up. "I guess I am." "About time." The two men laughed, then silence settled between them, a comfortable silence, the kind friends share. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the library before opening. Sandra unlocked the doors. She immediately noticed the folder. Her face lit up. "How'd it go?" "I got the contract." For a second, she looked happier than he was. Then she hugged him, quickly, before either of them got embarrassed. "I knew it." "No, you didn't." "I absolutely did." Ethan laughed. The sound surprised him. He hadn't laughed much lately, not real laughter. The next few weeks became a blur. Days at the library, nights sketching, hours reviewing plans, hours correcting designs, hours learning software updates that had changed during his years away. The industry had moved forward. He had to catch up, fast. Every morning began the same way. Coffee, notebook.
Work. The old ritual remained. No matter how busy he became, one sketch every day. That promise stayed. Some nights he worked until the library closed. Sandra often found him still drawing. "You should go sleep." "I will." "You said that 2 hours ago." He smiled. "Almost done." She shook her head, but she understood. Work had become more than income. Work meant identity. Work meant proof. Proof that he still existed. Then the first setback arrived, because setbacks always arrive. The contract lasted 6 weeks. At the end of week 5, Ethan received an email. Budget reductions, project delays, additional contracts postponed. The message hit like a punch. His stomach dropped. He knew that language, corporate language, the kind that usually ended badly. That night, he barely slept. The old fears returned. What if this was it? What if the opportunity ended before it started? What if he lost everything again? The bridge suddenly felt closer than ever. The next morning, Robert called. "Come by the office." Ethan spent the entire train ride expecting bad news. Instead, Robert handed him another folder. Different project, different client, bigger responsibility. Ethan stared at him. "I thought funding got cut." "One project did." Robert smiled. "Not all of them." Relief washed through Ethan so hard he nearly laughed. Robert leaned forward. "You know something?" "What?" "You still think every door leads to a wall." Ethan didn't answer, because it was true.
Years of disappointment trained him that way, Robert continued. "You're going to have to unlearn that." Those words stayed with him, just like Sandra's, just like Curtis's. People were helping rebuild things inside him, not just his career, him. Months passed. Winter slowly surrendered to spring. Snow disappeared. Trees woke up. The city softened. Ethan's work improved. His confidence followed. Not quickly, not all at once, but steadily. Then came the first paycheck that felt real. Not survival money, not temporary money, real money. Enough to make plans, enough to breathe, enough to dream again. The first thing he did was pay Curtis back, every dollar. Curtis tried refusing. Ethan insisted. Then he bought dinner, burgers, fries, milkshakes. Nothing fancy, but neither man complained. A few weeks later, Ethan rented a room. Small, simple, one window, second floor, old building. But it had a bed, a door that locked, a shower, a kitchen.
The first night there, he sat on the edge of the mattress. The room felt strange, too quiet. No traffic overhead, no bridge, no river, no fear of someone stealing his backpack while he slept. For nearly an hour, he just sat there, listening to silence. Then he cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, because the weight of survival had finally loosened its grip, and his body didn't know what to do with that. The next morning, he woke up in the same place. That mattered. The morning after that, too. That mattered even more.
Months became a year. The room became an apartment. The contract became a position. The position became a career. Robert promoted him twice, not because of charity, because of performance, because Ethan earned it. One project led to another, then another. His designs started gaining attention. Clients noticed details others missed. Practical solutions, human solutions, designs created by someone who understood struggle, who understood what it meant to lose a place to call home. The experience changed his work, changed everything. Then came a phone call he never expected. His daughter, now 17. "Dad? Hey, kiddo." She hesitated, then spoke softly. "Mom and I are coming downtown Saturday." "Okay. You want to have lunch?" Ethan closed his eyes, just for a second. "Yeah, I'd like that." Saturday arrived. He got there early. Of course he did. He always got there early when something mattered. The restaurant overlooked the river. Sunlight bounced across the water. People filled the tables. Then he saw them. Melissa and Emma, his daughter, taller now, older, almost grown. For a second, he saw the little girl she used to be. Then she smiled and wrapped her arms around him. The hug lasted longer than either expected. Neither complained. Lunch felt awkward at first. Years create distance. Pain creates more. But slowly, conversation returned. Stories, memories, laughter. Small pieces of family finding their way home. Not everything healed. Some wounds don't.
Some relationships change forever. Melissa and Ethan would never be husband and wife again. Both understood that. But forgiveness arrived, and forgiveness was enough. As the years passed, Ethan never forgot the bridge, never forgot the shelter workers, never forgot Sandra, never forgot Curtis, never forgot the feeling of being invisible. So he started volunteering, then mentoring, then funding programs helping homeless adults learn professional skills. Not because he felt obligated, because he remembered. Memory became purpose. One evening, nearly 6 years after receiving Robert's business card, Ethan stood before a newly completed community center. His design, his project, his name on the plans. Children ran through the entrance. Families gathered outside. The building glowed beneath warm lights. A reporter asked him a question. What does success feel like? Ethan thought about it, really thought about it. Success wasn't the paycheck, though that helped. Success wasn't the apartment, though he loved it. Success wasn't the title, or the office, or the recognition. Success was waking up without fear. Success was calling his daughter whenever he wanted. Success was looking in the mirror and recognizing himself again. That was the real answer. A few months later, Ethan walked alone along the river, the same river that once flowed beneath the bridge. The city lights reflected across the water, just like before. Only now he stood on the other side of the story. He paused near a dark window and saw his reflection. Gray appeared around his temples. Lines marked the corners of his eyes. But the man staring back looked familiar again. Finally, he smiled, then kept walking. The bridge still stood in the distance. Cars still crossed it. Trains still passed nearby. Someone was probably sleeping beneath it tonight. Someone carrying dreams nobody could see. Someone trying not to disappear. Someone who still had no idea what tomorrow might bring. Ethan understood that person, because he had been that person, and some part of him always would be.
The truth is that people are stronger than their worst chapter. A lost job is not a lost life. A foreclosure is not a final verdict. A bridge, a shelter, or a borrowed couch cannot measure a person's worth. Most people carry private battles nobody else can see. Most people have stood somewhere in life feeling ashamed, afraid, or forgotten. What matters is not how far you fall. What matters is whether you keep protecting the small part of yourself that still believes tomorrow can be better. Sometimes that part is a sketchbook. Sometimes it's a phone call. Sometimes it's 3 simple words from someone you love. Hope rarely arrives as a miracle. Most often it arrives as another ordinary day and asks you to keep going. Who might you become if you stopped believing your hardest season was your final one?